the president who shaped America's future in silence. It's often the loudest voices in history that capture our attention. The presidents who gave impassioned speeches, who made bold moves on the world stage, whose actions echoed across the globe. But sometimes, it is the quieter voices that have the most profound impact. This is a story of one such president. A man who led not through dramatic speeches or grand gestures, but through quiet, steadfast leadership that changed the trajectory of America in ways few could have imagined at the time. Calvin Coolidge, the 30th President of the United States, was a man of few words, yet his presidency would mark one of the most economically prosperous periods in American history. He rose to the presidency after the sudden death of Warren G. Harding in 1923, inheriting an office plagued by scandal and public distrust. Coolidge, a man of great personal integrity and deep commitment to conservative values, did not seek to restore the image of the office through grandiose displays of leadership. Instead, he focused on the one thing that mattered most to him, returning America to a period of stability and prosperity. Under Coolidge, the economy soared. The Roaring Twenties, a period marked by unprecedented economic growth, technological innovation, and cultural change, is often attributed to his presidency. While Coolidge didn't take the credit for these achievements, his policies, which focus on fiscal conservatism, reducing taxes, and limiting government intervention, laid the groundwork for the economic boom. Coolidge believed that the government's role should be limited, and that the country could thrive without excessive regulation or interference. Despite his hands-off approach to governance, Coolidge's presidency was far from passive. He was a staunch advocate for civil rights, standing firm against a racial injustice that marred the nation. Coolidge took significant steps to promote racial equality, albeit quietly and without fanfare. His commitment to reducing government interference extended to the treatment of African Americans and minorities, though it would take years before his efforts were truly realized in later administrations. Yet, Coolidge's legacy is complicated. His economic policies, though successful in the short term, are often viewed as a precursor to the financial excesses that led to the Great Depression. His aversion to government intervention in the economy meant that he didn't enact sufficient regulatory safeguards against the rising tide of speculation and financial instability. Coolidge's presidency, though largely free of scandal and controversy, was marked by a failure to anticipate the impending crisis. In the quiet nature of his leadership, Coolidge reshaped America's future, but in ways that were not fully understood until much later. His commitment to personal integrity, limited government, and fiscal conservatism would come to define an era of economic optimism and lay the foundation for many future political debates. While Coolidge's presidency was defined by relative peace and prosperity, it was also a time of intense cultural and social change. The 1920s were a decade of rebellion and revolution, a time when traditional values were challenged by new ideas, music, and lifestyles. Coolidge, despite his reserved nature, presided over a society that was embracing change. The Jazz Age exploded in popularity during Coolidge's time in office, symbolizing the energetic cultural shift in America. This was an era of economic prosperity, but also one of stark contrasts between the growing elite class and the struggling poor, between traditionalism and the rise of modernity. The flapper, the Harlem Renaissance, and the explosion of jazz music all defined this vibrant time. But Coolidge, ever the quiet leader, seemed less involved in the cultural scene, focusing instead on maintaining stability and ensuring that the country stayed on its prosperous path. Yet, the 1920s, though successful on the surface, were not without their flaws. Coolidge's insistence on keeping government out of business did not address the underlying issues of inequality and speculation that were bubbling beneath the surface. As the stock market boomed, many Americans became obsessed with the idea of quick wealth, and a lack of financial regulation allowed the seeds of crisis to be sown. In 1929, just a year after Coolidge left office, the Great Depression struck, shaking the very foundation of American society. Coolidge, who had championed minimal government intervention, was not around to face the fallout. Yet, many would look back at his presidency and question whether his hands-off approach had played a role in the economic collapse. Was his reluctance to regulate the economy, his belief that the market would self-correct, a miscalculation that set the stage for the disaster to come? In many ways, Coolidge's presidency exemplified the contradictions of the 1920s an era marked by both incredible achievement and dangerous excess. His quiet leadership kept the country moving forward, but also ignored the rising tensions and inequalities that would soon spiral out of control. Coolidge's legacy is one of mixed success, a man who shaped the country's economic future, but who also left the nation vulnerable to the forces of greed and speculation. As the Great Depression took hold in the 1930s, Coolidge's legacy became the subject of intense debate. While he presided over one of the most prosperous periods in U.S. history, his laissez-faire approach to government left the country ill-prepared for the economic collapse that followed. The stock market crash of 1929 and the subsequent years of economic hardship forced Americans to reevaluate the role of government in their lives. Coolidge's political philosophy, which had emphasized the importance of limited government intervention, was increasingly seen as a failure in the face of widespread unemployment, poverty, and economic instability. The belief that businesses should be left to regulate themselves was put to the test, and it failed. Americans were now looking to the government not to withdraw, but to intervene and provide relief. In the wake of the Depression, President Franklin D. Roosevelt took office and implemented the New Deal, a series of government programs designed to provide relief, reform, and recovery. Roosevelt's leadership stood in stark contrast to Coolidge's. Where Coolidge had believed in minimal intervention, Roosevelt championed the idea that government should play a central role in restoring stability and guiding the economy. The public, hungry for action and change, quickly embraced Roosevelt's approach, leaving Coolidge's quieter methods in the rearview mirror. But Coolidge's legacy was not completely erased. His commitment to fiscal conservatism and small government would influence future political movements, especially those focused on reducing federal spending and government interference. His policies became the foundation for debates about the size and scope of government that continue to this day. In hindsight, Coolidge's presidency serves as a complex reminder of the balance required in leadership. While his policies helped create a period of prosperity, they also allowed for the unchecked greed and speculative practices that led to the economic collapse. Coolidge's legacy challenges us to think about the role of government, the consequences of inaction, and the importance of leadership in times of both success and crisis. The story of Calvin Coolidge is one of paradox, a man who led during a time of great prosperity, but whose policies inadvertently set the stage for the economic disaster that followed. His quiet, reserved demeanor and hands-off approach to governance made him an unlikely candidate for the era of dramatic change that would follow his presidency. Coolidge's legacy, while initially praised for its focus on economic growth and limited government, has been reassessed in light of the Great Depression's aftermath. Coolidge's story is ultimately one of both success and failure. On the one hand, his administration oversaw a period of unparalleled economic growth, with business booms, technological advancements, and a rising standard of living. On the other hand, his failure to regulate the market and address the rising inequalities led to the very excesses that caused the Great Depression. Coolidge's presidency challenges us to think about the balance between government intervention and free market capitalism, and what happens when that balance tips too far in one direction. Though Coolidge left office with little fanfare, his legacy remains a touchstone in debates about the role of government and the economy. He shaped an era that became known for its prosperity, but he also left a cautionary tale about the limits of laissez-faire economics. His quiet revolution was a double-edged sword. It spurred growth, but also sowed the seeds for a financial disaster that would follow. In the end, Coolidge's presidency serves as a reminder that leadership is not just about achieving success, but about recognizing the long-term consequences of your actions. What Coolidge taught us is that while it's important to create prosperity, it's equally important to regulate, to ensure that growth doesn't turn into unchecked excess. Coolidge's story is a quiet one, but a powerful lesson about the role of leadership in shaping the future.